learn how you learn. Follow the people in the industry who you want to be like. Ask the questions. I tell people too, I had mentors and I still do. I will go to somebody and say, I really love this skill that you have. Could you help me to learn and develop that? And you know, in years of doing this, only once was I ever told no.
Welcome in, everybody. You're listening to Wrestling Payments, a podcast where we help payment professionals contend with the challenges of modernizing their payments operations and identifying ways to build for the future. If you're interested in payments innovation and modernization, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Joe Casali. Welcome to Wrestling Payments, a podcast by NEACH. And I'm very excited today to have one of my good friends and a leader in this field because he started it all out with us with the podcasting, the payments professor. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, since I'm on Wrestling Payments, I have to say I am Kevin, the Payments Professor Olsen. And I'm so glad to be here. And yeah, Joe, it's been almost, believe it or not, 5 years of Payments Professor. And it's hard to believe and look back. And man, I got to tell you, hats off to you and what you guys are doing. This is fun.
It is fun. It is fun. So I got to stay with the theme. Were you a wrestling fan at all?
I was when I was little, you know, because I grew up in the days of Hulk Hogan when there was the cartoon and all of that stuff. And yeah, Randy Savage. I mean, when I was little, I was. As I've gotten older, not so much. But that's because I became a fan of electronic payments. And once you get into payments, there really is nothing else.
Excellent. Good to hear. I am unfortunately still a fan. So I try to relate it back. So, and question for you. This is your question. I've stolen it from you. I use it all the time. When you were little, watching Hulk Hogan on Saturday morning, was payments where you thought you were going to end up?
Oh, absolutely not. It wasn't even anywhere in my hemisphere, let's just say. I got in this field totally by accident. What had happened is, if we go back to the first .com bubble, because, you know, there's a lot of gray in this beard, I was around there. I had just gotten a tech degree. You know, I actually got a bachelor's degree in computers. Nice. And we're talking like Windows 95, 98 type stuff though, okay? And .com bubble comes and boom, I'm out of a job. Well, a local tech college said, hey, could you come work for us? And I'm like, what do you mean come work for you? It's like, be a teacher. I'm like, I can't teach. But I needed to make money, right? So I started teaching. Believe it or not, I'm doing good. In fact, I'm teaching a program to basically misfits. And one of my students is visually impaired, but he's got to be able to physically build a computer. So I went home, put on a blindfold every night and figured out how to build a computer totally blind and helped him to do this and actually pass and be certified. And the local news found out about it because we were successful in building that computer. And at the same time, the state of Georgia cut the funding for the class. So I'm suddenly out of a job again. And this guy shows up for a local software company that was building some early stuff in Check 21, had some early stuff in ACH management, and said, if you can help people who can't see on computers, I have some banks that can seriously use your help. And next thing I know, I'm like, I need a job. My kids need to eat. I'm in the electronic banking industry, and I've never been able to get out.
That's awesome. You know, and for the folks listening at home, this isn't an act. This isn't a spiel. This is Kevin. Kevin always thinks outside the box. Always has a unique approach to stuff.
A friend of mine actually recently said, you don't think outside the box, you think outside the straitjacket.
Very true. And it's all good. Honestly, I was actually afraid to have you on my podcast because you're Kevin, the payments professor. Been doing it for years. Your audio, video, got it all going on. So I was like, but it was time. And I hope we're going to have a debate, a discussion, something along the lines. We recently did a study and we asked our members how many folks have a payment strategy for FedNow or RTP. 50% were somewhere on their journey. They were creating it, getting started, implementing, but 50% weren't. And you and I go back to the payments world, the association world, and there were always this audience that we're going to wait and see. What are your thoughts on, is FedNow something you should be waiting for and seeing? Is FedNow and RTP something you should be jumping into? What do you think?
Okay, there's a lot in there in what you just said. Let's say, like, first of all, one of the dirtiest things you can say as far as words and payments is legacy systems. That's the worst one. But the second worst one is payment strategy. I mean, it's like turning the light on in a dark room and cockroaches scatter, because people just, they hate hearing that. And I'm a firm believer you need to get involved and get involved early. But I also realize on the other side of it is we have these financial institutions, especially the smaller and mid-sized ones, that they are juggling so many balls in the air. They're, I'll ask this question a lot in places. I'll be like, all right, raise your hand if you're ACH. Keep your hand up if you're wires. Keep your hand up if you're cards. Keep your hand up if you're treasury management. And I'll have people that I'll go through the list and they're like having to hold up their own arm with another arm because it's so much that they're trying to be able to work and process. And then you throw in, and this is why I started with legacy systems, the fact that they are going to be bringing on something new, something different, something with immediate funds availability in a system that may or may not be able to handle it. And they're scared. I mean, they're absolutely terrified. They're lost, wondering, how do I build a strategy for something that is hard to understand and changes the whole game? But I'm a firm believer, the earlier you are on, the more success you're going to have.
Okay. Question around, so I'm gonna bounce your question back at you. So payment strategy is a bad word. Is it a better way to say modernization? And I asked that for years. We were talking about, what's your our payments modernization? Are you going to modernize your payment systems? And it was a lot of dead ears. A lot of, no, I got a core. I got to do this. I can't do that this time. And then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, people were working at home the next day. And there was a lot of modernization that went on. How do you, I think there's been some momentum on that. Have you seen any momentum around, I know you can put a little plug in, you have a day job, you work for a fintech. Have you seen upticks? Have you seen interest in actually modernizing systems? What are you seeing on the ground?
Okay, well, I think what is happening from a fintech point of view is we are finding ways that even if you don't modernize your system, we can modernize what you're able to offer within your system. But I also think this, when I think payment strategy, I don't think payments modernization. I think payments modernization is the side effect or what actually happens from having a payment strategy. Now, as you know, I went back to school in COVID and got a master's degree. And I did this in industrial and organizational psychology because it's just something that fascinates me. And as part of that, you may know, I actually built a course on payment strategy as one of my projects, one of my major semester-long projects, where I incorporated ideas from psychology into building a strategy. And it really, I can make it this simple. A strategy is just a plan with steps that are in the right order, in the correct order, that is followed through. And it's the follow through that is the key. And so, like, I know you guys at NEACH, you have consulting services that will help with people to go in and help to build that plan. Because the strategy is really, it's looking at, hey, where do I want to get to and how do I get there? It's like in football. We come out with a strategy of, okay, we're going to play heavier defense because this particular team, if we don't stop their offense, there's no way we can win. Or we're going to come out, we're going to play heavier offense because maybe in this particular geographic area, being offensive is going to help us to be able to get further along. And then deeper in your strategy, it's, okay, am I offensive? Am I defensive? Am I going to be attacking consumers or am I going to be working more with businesses? Is it going to be a little bit of both? Do I need to be specific use cases or just say, hey, it's here? And with FedNow, I'll tell you, I think the number one strategy everybody should go with is be able to receive government benefit payments. Number one, simplest strategy in the world.
And we know FedNow is going to be part of the government. We don't know in what way, we don't know which benefits, but the Treasury has said we'll play and be some part of it, which is really interesting. I don't know if you know, this podcast began out of a committee, and the committee was the new role of operations. And what we found there is that there was, and this is when, the first time we heard the words quiet quitting or those sorts of things. And the question came up, and I'm going to get to a point. The question came up of how do you improve skills of folks? And our audience is typically, our listeners, the people we train, are typically operations folks. Now, when you talk about strategy, is strategy something the board worries about and we're going to get our orders and they're going to tell us the strategy? Or is that something that even the senior operations staff person, maybe an officer, maybe a leader, how do each of them play in that area?
I feel like you asked me two main questions in there. So let me unpack both of them. First of all, addressing the quiet quitting with operations people. Also, in my studies, I even wrote another paper on how to best educate with FedNow. No kidding, specifically on FedNow. Did the research of banks around the world, and the solution comes down to it's got to be fun. Believe it or not, like I'm a big fan, I call it edutainment. And it's proven that people learn best in one of two states, fear and joy. I don't like the fear side. It might work, but I don't like the fear side. I like the joy side. The other thing is these are people with busy schedules, juggling a lot of balls. Make it bite-sized. Make it easy for them to be able to ingest. Make it something that they can get over time, that they can revisit, relearn as much as they need to. And that's where they're going to find their success. But on the other side is that board. The other side is that executive management team that their job is to make sure that the financial institution keeps moving forward, that it generates the income it needs to stay afloat, to be able to have those employees, to keep those account holders happy. They're the ones that are focused on strategy. As I rose through the ranks in different organizations and got higher up, suddenly I am reporting more to boards. I became executive management. And suddenly my focus changed to, okay, how do I get this accomplished? How do I meet bottom lines? And then strategy was the number one most important thing to me. In fact, my title now is innovation and strategy. I basically, my boss said, I want you to come up with creative ways to make me money. And I'm like, okay, what would that title be? And he goes, you tell me. You're the one to be creative and come up with ways to make me money. So I said, well, it sounds like innovation and strategy. Nice. So it is finding those new ways to be able to implement things. And, the biggest constant thing I have learned in electronic payments is it's always changing. It's always evolving. And I tell people, you want to be successful, you keep up with those changes. So financial institutions out there, you want to be successful, keep up with those changes. Being the last is not keeping up. Being the last is basically just treading water and staying afloat. If you can get more in the middle of the boat or the head of the boat, then you're doing a little bit more than keeping up. You're being, you're leading the industry in being able to do those things. And I think too, those strategists at that higher level, I really think they want to hear what the account holders have to say. And they want to hear that an account holder says things like, my bank offers me that. I got that at my credit union. I don't have to worry about going anywhere else because I'm satisfied. And let it trickle into other products and services too. That gets overlooked. When I'm happy with my relationship, I'm willing to go, I need a car loan too. Can you guys help me with that?
No, as a consumer,
and I pay it with
I agree. Yeah, completely agree. As a consumer, that's the my brain immediately goes to, well, I'll ask, my bank must do that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So interesting. The next question, and I don't have, this was totally unplanned as far as scripting goes. The next question I have is, I am just entering the banking world, the strange world of banking. And they're introducing me to these systems. Some of them I don't understand. Some of them make a lot of sense. If I'm going to build my career in banking, which I don't know if I'm going to do yet, but I'm here, I have a job, it's a good job, good benefits. What skills should I be looking out for? What skills should I be acquiring as that new financial institution? And if you want to lean over to fintech, new fintech hire.
Well, it's interesting in my business consulting, business coaching that I do, I have two businesses of my own, and that is one of them, and it's actually starting to take off. I tell people, here's the number one skill I want you to learn, and that is how you learn. If you can figure out and master learning, you will do so much better because every job's a little bit different. You can tell me an identical position of how it looks on a piece of paper, and they can both be, right there wherever you guys, in Bedford, let's say, okay? I'm a little partial. I lived there at one point in time. All right. And you got two banks across the street from each other, but it's going to be totally different. It's going to be some different skill sets you'll have to learn. So when you find ways to creatively learn and find the avenues that work for you, there's, for example, a process called chunking. Chunking is breaking things down into individual bite-sized things. That's one of the things I focus on because I know it works. It's also finding what works for you. Like, for example, I've had some evaluations where people are like, the payments professor's got way too much energy and talks way too fast for me. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. Yeah. Find who does work for you. There are some great, other podcasts that are out there. FinTech Brain Food. My friend Simon Taylor over in the UK. Love him. There's another one called Bite-Size Payments that's recently coming out. A retired CEO who's just gone back and how to make it more easy to learn the basics of payments. That's his focus, is the history and basics of payments from the CEO level, so it trickles down to everybody has the same understanding. Mm-hmm. But don't give up on that learning. I mean, one of my biggest secrets is I went home and read the ACH rules. And when we're talking early 2000s, I got handed the ACH rule book and I got told to go read it. And I went home and I started reading it, and true story, I'm like second day on the job and I'm not married anymore, but my wife at the time, she walks in and I'm crying. She's like, why are you crying? I'm like, we're going to go hungry. I don't know what in the world this is. Oh, no. And then I got to the operating guidelines. I mean, we all know the secret. When you get to the back of the book, it gets so much easier to understand. Mm-hmm. And I just read it and I kept reading and I kept reading it. And I never was afraid to ask a question. I mean, Joe, you see me in person. I've asked some questions that everybody looks and goes, what did he just say? That's stupid. But I would ask. So learn how you learn. Follow the people in the industry who you want to be like. If you want to be like them, you follow them. If you don't want to be like them, don't follow them. And ask the questions. I tell people too, I had mentors and I still do. I will go to somebody and say, I really love this skill that you have. Could you help me to learn and develop that? And in years of doing this, only once was I ever told no. Only once did somebody say no. Otherwise, everybody has said, sure, let's schedule a call. I'd be glad to talk to you and tell you what I did.
Nice. That's really good information. We are still a new podcast. We don't have any sponsors or any of that, but you're so interesting. Could you pitch as if you're doing a commercial for what you do? Because you've got a lot of angles, and I want to, let's give it an opportunity to have a payments professor commercial right now. As far as what do you have to offer people who want to learn about payments?
Okay. The Payments Professor. It's lights, camera, transactions. It's taking electronic payments and making them simplified. When you simplify electronic payments learning and you make it fun, it becomes so much easier. There's the website, there's the YouTube channel, there's even Instagram and the podcast. Multiple avenues for people to be able to go learn, really focus on faster payments, but what they need to know to be able to improve their skills, improve their knowledge, and improve their career in electronic payments.
Excellent. Thank you. And just as a highlight, can you talk about the few guests that have been on your show? Because it's so odd. I know you. I'll be going through podcasts and I go, oh, what's Kevin? Let me see what Kevin did this time. And it's like, that was great. And could you touch on one especially? I think his name was Ray or Richard Ray?
Richard Ray. Yeah, Rick Ray, actually.
It was so good. Could you, I don't, this may get cut out. I don't know, but it was so interesting because of his story spread over so much time and he saw so much innovation.
Well, let me actually answer it this way. Let me first tell you how the Payments Professor, Payments Podium got started. Mm-hmm. I had no intention of doing a podcast. I got hired on with a company. It was Vsoft at the time. We've changed and broken off to something different since then. But first day on the job, I'm in Atlanta at the home office instead of my home office, right? I'm in Atlanta. I'm working there. It's the big open Google type environment, but I find a little room in the back to go have a phone call with Echo. You remember Ellen from Echo? It was one of those calls. Sure. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something we're arguing over a change in a definition within regulation CC or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm in this back room. I got it on speakerphone. We've got this conversation, this banter going back and forth. And my CEO walks in. He's an older Indian guy. He walks in, he looks at me, he goes, "What was that?" And I went, "What do you mean? That was my conference call with Echo." He goes, No, you tell me what that was. And I'm like, Okay, it was a conference call with Echo. They're the electronic check clearinghouse organization, and we were discussing some changes to regulation CCC. I think I'm in trouble. I really do. And all of a
Sounds
sudden
it.
he goes, "That's brilliant." And I went, "What's brilliant?" He goes, "I love listening to that. Record it and make it a podcast," and just walked away. So then here I am going, uh-oh, I just got myself in trouble. I have to do something that I don't know how to do. So the first thing I did is I started asking my friends, "Hey, can you guys be on this podcast? Can we talk about this?" Next thing I know, other people started saying, "Could you talk about this topic?" It's like, "Sure, I'll find somebody to do it." I put requests out in the early days on LinkedIn. Would somebody please be on my podcast? I would go to conferences, and if I saw a speaker I liked, I'd say, "Hey, can I talk to you?" But what really changed for the payments professor and helped is I started seeing the people that were retiring. I started seeing the people that had all this years of experience. Like, our Phyllis Myerson, I had her on at one point in time. David Walker, if we're going to talk about Echo, that was out there. And I said, "Can you please come on and share your experiences?" And then what I'd ask them too is like, when we cut, "Is there anybody else you think that I should talk to?" And they would say, "Hey, Rick Ray, you need to go talk to him. He was over at Chase. He did some great things there." Or, they would just point me to more and more people. And it's got to the point now that by just doing that and doing like you are, Joe, you're an authentic person, which I really respect. And being authentic in it to help other people, all of a sudden, I got a backlog. I can't get podcasts out fast enough now because they just start coming to you to be able to go, let's help the entire industry to grow.
I will tell you, I don't mean to get fully engaged, but man, I start listening to episodes and it's there, to the point where I actually leave a comment. I don't leave a comment on anything. I leaving comments. That Richard Ray one, and I highly recommend it. It was great. The guy got a summer job in check processing at the Fed. It was the kids of
Because
employees.
he needed a date. He needed money for a date, so he ended up working at the Fed.
And then Chase, and then here, and then it's just
And spoiler, he
fascinating.
married her.
Yes. Very nice. All right. So back to the show, really unscripted. Anything people should be aware? We just launched FedNow a week ago, 2 weeks ago. July 20th, we launched it. We didn't launch it, but it was launched. RTP's been around for 5 years. What should people be excited or on the lookout for in the next year?
Oh my gosh. As you know, I've gotten to the geek level of I pay attention globally of what's happening around the world of payments. And the more I've gotten involved with that, the more I realize that there's no doubt in my mind we have to have instant payment capability in the US, if for no other reason but to compete globally. That's a fact. I mean, other countries are so far ahead of us. It's becoming a global standard. It's actually a standard in the US. People don't want to recognize that, but you think Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, that is a standard that people like to use, and at least appears to be instant. So the reality is, what will it mean next? How can it benefit you? I tell everybody, U.S. Department of Treasury is the catalyst for getting on to be able to receive. But the one I really think is going to take off, the one I really think will change things is request for payment. The request for payment mechanism will revolutionize and change bills, paying bills, being able to accept bills, being able to exchange funds. Why? Because a request for payment is not a debit. And all of you out there right now working in operations, I would ask you, what are your exceptions like? Are they debits? I know 99% of them are. Imagine if we got rid of those. Well, imagine if we got rid of the person calling, "Why did this debit my account?" And we changed it to they received a request and they could just respond to it. Now that's at a consumer level. Where it will really, truly impact the most is at a business level. I've been doing a lot of work with businesses that are saying, "Can it handle this format? Can it handle this format?" And when you're able to say over and over again, because of the ISO 20022 and what it can do, that yes, it can handle that format, they're listening. They're more interested than ever before. I even like to point out that there are several treasury management, cash management applications that were ready for RTP long before FedNow was even announced. And because they see it transforming the world of treasury management, AP, AR, all of that is going to be, it's going to radically change over the next few years. So if you do small business banking, Here is an opportunity for you to set an anchor deep that will hook people with you, keep them tied to you, because you'll be able to offer business level services, consumer level services, using instant payments, but really using the RFP mechanism that has never been seen before.
And just to recap, both RTP and FedNow are credit push systems.
Yes.
So this thing called a request for payment is me handing the instructions over to Kevin and saying, if you want to send me a credit, here's all the information you need. And that handover is electronic through the system, through an app, through your bank. And then Kevin gets to decide when to execute that, and then his bank sends the payment. So that's where folks need to start sending in order to participate.
So example, Joe Casali, he sends me a request for payment. I'm going to pay him back. That Sean Carter guy, I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. I'm not sending him money.
Excellent.
But I get the choice of deciding who the money goes to. And it can happen any day of the week, any day of the year, any time of the day.
Any time of the day. I know I just literally in passing just saw that OPN and North American Banking Company, holding company, that's Mike Bilski's company. They just signed an agreement for RTP, RFPs. I know that the Fed is very, very interested in either finalizing or have finalized their formats for requests for payments.
Joe, let me go ahead. I got to brag a little. Pigeon is one of only 6 organizations that is fully certified on everything FedNow can do, including RTP.
And
we're also certified on FedNow and the RTP network. So both networks, we can do anything that can be done on there because we see that future really coming too.
And how do I
as far
find
as
Pigeon?
what's going to happen in the world of RFP, RTP and FedNow may not be interoperable, but there's been rumors at least that the two have worked together on some standards that I would be paying attention to, early fall on some standards coming out.
Excellent. How do I find Pigeon? How do I spell Pigeon?
Pigeon. Well, it's interesting. It's Pidgin. If you've ever been to Hawaii, and in Hawaii they have their own language, and the reason they have their own language is it's called Pidgin English, and it came about because Hawaii is a beautiful island, in the middle of the Pacific, and so people from China, from Japan, from Guam, from Samoa, from Peru, from the U.S., even Britain would all come to this beautiful island and try to conduct trade, but there was no common language. So suddenly there came this Pidgin English, this common language that could be used regardless of, in our case, the payment channel, but the country or nationality to be able to have the exchange of services and goods take place. So it's Pidgin, and it's actually pidgin.net. Excellent.
That's a good name. Good story too. I think that's all I have for today. Anything you want to wrap up with? Anything a mission you want to give folks on the way out the door?
A mission is get out there and learn all you can about what's happening with FedNow. Stay on the pulse of it. I can tell you right now, I have been building courses galore, but I'm already starting to move on to CBDC. Is it coming? I don't know. I think so. Am I a big fan of it? Not really. But that won't stop it from coming. Pay attention to what is going to be next. Stay up to date on your rules changes, especially. Don't forget about ACH or checks. They're not going away yet. That will help solidify your career as well. But never stop learning. Tune into Wrestling Payments on a regular basis so that you can keep up with what's happening in the ever-evolving world of electronic payments.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. I hope to have you on again. You were my milestone, the thing I feared most about if I'm not ready, Kevin will know. So thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime, Jeff.
On behalf of NEACH, your trusted resource in payments, and our guests, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about payments innovation and modernization, you can find the Wrestling Payments Podcast on the podcast page of NEACH.org or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search for Wrestling Payments in your podcast app. Thanks for listening.